With the release of Stellaris 3.2, it's time for the patch notes. Now, it's important to know that at this point in time, we are currently on version 3.2.2, as there have already been a hot patch and such. However, it's time to go over the details. What has changed? What is new? And how do things work these days? Let's dive right into the 3.2 patch notes and see what is up. Well, for the 3.1 version, it's mostly stability related, as we had some problems with some of the items in the game. And an important factor here is that the Aquatics trait itself has changed ever so slightly. As of 3.1, you will no longer get the special admiral trait for the Aquatics, and on top of that, they will now cost 1 instead of 0. This is a slight nerf to the Aquatics trait itself, and it's something you want to keep in mind when building your aquatic empire. What you've seen in our preview video or review video from yesterday is that Aquatics was costing 0, and now it is 1. This is a minor change to this particular setup. Aside from that, there is not a lot to talk about for the 3.2.1 patch. However, it's time to take a look at the 3.2 patch itself, because there is a reasonable amount of things to look at. First of all, there is a brand new pre-scripted empire. It is, of course, aquatic, and we shall have a quick look at this empire. Ignore the giant list of empires that I already have. And, of course, let's take a quick look here. It is down in the list here, all the way over here. It's called the Sapphirilian Bliss, and they are anglers as well as environmentalists, and they come with the aquatic trait as well as several other interesting things, such as non-adaptive, which makes perfect sense for Ocean Paradise, because of course Ocean Paradise is the origin they will start with. They are xenophobic and fanatic pacifists. They will hate you, but they will hate going to war with you. That's generally the idea there. The new phenotype portraits are, of course, something that is part of Aquatics, and of course all the other items as well. And please be aware that this particular species empire is only available if you are, of course, part of the Aquatics package. There's also a new trait for that was added through the Humanoids pack, and we can take a look at that as well. It is called Pompous Purists, which I think is rather cool. If we can quickly take a look at them, Pompous Purists can only engage in diplomacy with other empires if they are the proposer. They are basically using the Fallen Empire style of communications. They can only talk to you and only suggest things to you. In addition, they will be very easy to have relationships with, as long as, of course, they talk to you and they get additional envoys, which can make them very powerful in terms of having spies and stuff like that. As far as I understand as well, they completely ignore things like closed borders, which makes them effectively the perfect multiplayer counterpart if you are playing with another player for scouting, because they can go anywhere they like, because screw you and screw your communications. Still though, there's some other things to talk about as well, of course. First of all, multiplayer hosts that own the DLC packages will now unlock portraits as well as ships and backgrounds. So from plantoids and humanoids, if you were encountering issues with that in the past, this has now been resolved. There are 200 new star names in the game. Why? I do not know. They probably got a little bit creative there. There are 13 new random events to terraforming to make the feature more engaging. So how does that actually work? Well, let's say hypothetically that you are in the process of terraforming a planet, and we'll just quickly load up a game where I have a planet ready for terraforming, and let's just quickly dive into one right now here, because I believe I have one ready to do so. As the screen goes dark for a second, let's take a quick look here at our empire. We have got a couple of worlds over here, and we can, for instance, terraform these. We have the option to terraform right now to various empires. We're going to need to research all technologies to make this possible. Let's say that we have an ocean world, right? This fallen outpost, so we want to turn it into an ocean world, and all of that's shenanigans, and then we got our fallen outpost over here, and we want to say finish all special projects. This is actually very useful because this is something that we can talk about in a little bit. Actually, it's finished terraforming. My apologies. So basically, we will get this little event coming here, and basically it will allow us to get additional districts to our planet. And there's a variety of these, which is rather cool. And basically what can happen is you can have new events popping up, etc., which is rather nice. The alien box as well, which is another item that is listed in this particular list. And basically what happens here is that I believe the hive minds have a new category here that they can choose from, which is pretty darn nice. So that's pretty cool. In addition, there are new asteroid-related anomalies. You can basically find anomalies on asteroids, such as crystallines that have been trapped and that sort of thing. I've encountered a couple of those already, and they're pretty fun. There's new gas giant anomalies, same boat there, as well as new anomalies to existing uninhabited worlds and their categories. I haven't encountered them just yet, but new anomalies to the game is always a good thing, and the content team over at Paradox Interactive have been busy with these, and I really wish we got more of these. Oh, I really wish so, because Distant Stars is probably my favorite expansion, which throws so many new anomalies into the mix, and that's a really big one for me as well. Enabled the ship browser for all players. This is something we should probably take a look at. Only 50% of players before had access to this, and basically what it means is that under the ship appearance, you would get access to this particular menu. So before, this was being rolled out to about 50% of the players as a test, and now the team has decided that yes, it is time for everybody to get access to this. And basically, it allows you to go through all of your ships quite easily. Take a look at what they look like and how whether or not you want to play with them. I really enjoy this. It also shows you the required DLC at the bottom of the screen, etc. So it is pretty darn nice. And of course, all the animations are here too, such as this Colossus from the Imperial ship set should be folding out very soon. Then we get to the improvements. Now, reinforcement fleets will now attempt to find a safe but longer path if the shortest path of the target fleet is not considered safe. What does that mean? It basically means that ships will no longer just beeline for the fleet that they're supposed to reinforce, but they will take a safer route. So no longer will they try to travel through systems that have enemies in them, which is rather nice. It will also reduce how often reinforcement fleets are spawned at shipyards at the cost of increased missing in action time. Basically, your ships will be not available for a longer time due to reinforcement, but they will spawn more frequently, which is actually, yeah, they will spawn more frequently, which is nice. Let's put it that way. Reinforcement fleets will now consider systems that have hostiles and allies in them for pathfinding purposes. Once again, it's similar to the reinforcement stuff up there. And reinforcement fleets using jump drives no longer require safe hyperlane paths, as they will just jump over there instead. Once again, reinforcement fleets will automatically go missing in action before merging with their main fleet. I think this is a workaround for fleets having to travel all the way across the galaxy, and they use a very similar system to what normal ships use, such as science ships that you hit the return button on and then they go missing in action and that sort of thing. A similar thing happens for the spatial jump that science ships can use, for instance, which is rather nice. I like this. This basically means that your ships will no longer get lost, and especially in the later game where you're generating hundreds of ship at the time, you won't have to babysit every single last one of them and just getting pop-ups left, right, and center saying your ship has been lost. Oh, well, that's great. I never got to use it to begin with. Improved how shipyards are selected when constructing reinforcements to better utilize stations with multiple shipyards and mega shipyards. Basically, this has to do with where ships are generated. Basically, if a shipyard is available nearby the shipyard that you're reinforcing from, ships will be generated there as well, rather than on just one location. Which is a pretty big deal because what I've noticed in the past is that you reinforce a fleet, a giant stack happens on one shipyard, and the gigantic shipyard that is next door is not used for some reason. This should now be resolved. So please go take a look at that and whether or not that is going to improve your reinforcement strategy for the game. Reinforcement fleets that fail to find a safe path to the target fleet will now merge with other fleets orbiting the same shipyard. So basically what happens there is if you cannot find a safe fleet, a safe route basically, you will get a spare fleet of those ships sitting at the shipyard itself, which automatically puts them into reduced upkeep, which is pretty nice. But in addition to that, it means that you don't lose them. But you also won't reinforce, which can be a little bit micromanagey because the side of your screen can fill up with a reasonable amount of ships, but at least they will merge into a single fleet rather than individual ships, which I think is a big quality of life changer because it wouldn't be the first time that my outliner is completely filled with individual ships, and that should now be done. Plantoids and fungoids have no longer forced to have no gender. So you can now free species gender independently. So how does this work? Let's take a quick look here at our species itself. There's now a little gender button over here where you can specify whether or not your species is mainly male, mainly female, or indeterminable. So basically this allows for additional role-playing scenarios for you to happen. If you want to play a single gender race or a multi-gender race, you can totally do that. It has no impact on the game whatsoever. Be interesting if it did in some way, shape, or form. If we had species traits that if male gives this bonus, if female gives this bonus, if indeterminable gives a reduced version of both of them, or something along those lines. I think that would be a nice tie-in for a trait down the line, but it doesn't really impact things all that much right now. Added the option to the alien box, which we just skipped, unfortunately. But yeah, the alien box gives gestalts an additional bonus. So if you are a hive mind, the alien box will give you an additional option. I tried to figure it out, and I couldn't actually find the details in the code, which is unfortunate. Added an additional colony designation to the Ecumenopolis. Industrial colony designation basically means that you will be able to define your colony as an industrial area, probably focused around the joys of consumer goods, because that's usually what the industrial side of things is, which is something that we should probably dive a little bit deeper into where possible. But actually, let me quickly have a look whether or not I've got any Ecumenopoli up and running right now. I don't think I actually do. Actually, I should do. Let me just boot up this here save game so that we can actually check what it actually means. As Camino right now, it has an empire. It's an empire capital, so we won't be able to get the details here, which is unfortunate. But yeah, there is a new designation for planets for Ecumenopoli in general, which is pretty helpful. Made it so colony events will not fire on newly terraformed worlds. To avoid some ludonarrative dissonance. Ludonarrative dissonance basically means that something does not fit with the game. Something that happens in the game world is completely opposed to something that happens as you're playing. So it's called ludonarrative dissonance. Feel free to go and look it up online. But basically, it's something that is completely at odds between the gameplay and the story itself. So newly terraformed worlds having colony events that make no sense between what is going on and what you're perceiving and how you're playing versus what is actually going on in the game world applies to this. Default flag of new empires is now randomized. Say goodbye to the red triangle black flag. That is unfortunate. I love the red black triangle flag. Almost half of my tutorial empires have that flag. Rip, you shall be missed. Some balanced stuff. There's a lot of good stuff here. Functional architecture and Constructobot reduce the free build slot granted from 2 to 1. Now, Constructobot and functional architecture after 3.1, the LEM update, was considered to be one of the best, if not the best, civic that you could have in the game. Why? Because, well, let's put it this way, and as you can see here, it now has just one building slot. Basically, it will allow you to build an additional lab extremely early on, allowing you that tech advantage. Functional architecture was in fact so good that apparently, according to developer telemetry, almost everybody was picking it. It made perfect sense. It is incredibly good, and it was probably a little bit too powerful. And it's a shame that, personally, I think it's a shame that it got changed as it is. It could have been nerfed into the ground into another way, like you would need to have a synergy civic or something along those lines. But it's now been reduced to just one building slot, just for the sake of balance, and I think that makes perfect sense. Agrarian Idyllic Empire now gets 1 planet building slot per 4 agricultural districts. I believe it was 3 before. So basically kind of the same story. Planetary build slots, anything that generates specialists is usually pretty powerful. So this got changed in a similar way as the functional architecture. Agrarian Ideal Empire is already pretty powerful the way they are, and this is once again a semi-nerf to that, which is unfortunate once again. Reduced ship upkeep cost modifier for Clone Army Admirals variants to 2, from 5 to 10 to 20. It was 10 to 15 to 25 before, I believe, or even higher in that respect. It basically made your fleets effectively free to run, which is particularly powerful, let's put it that way, especially if you combine it with, say, the traits for the fleet logistician trait. If you could get that combination up and running, you'd be golden, because your fleets would effectively be free to upkeep. Ruins of Shalash Arcsite no longer have a chance of giving quite as much unity as defeating an endgame crisis. Yeah, it probably gave you a tier 5 unity bonus, which is usually the highest tier in the game. Anything that's referred to as tier 5 within the game is usually the highest. And apparently in the Ruins of Shalash you would get it. I haven't actually covered the Ruins of Shalash just yet, or at the gates, or the Lost Library. I really should do so. I have a save file where all 3 of them spawn, and it's something that is on my list of things to do. I've got quite a lot of list of things to do, and one of them is, 2 of them are obviously the origins, as well as some of the deeper dives into the details for the pack, but you get the general idea. You can no longer use planet killers on primitives inside your borders if you lack the appropriate interference policies. Basically, you can no longer nilly-willy blow up the natives. Rip to you. Pups working as livestock now have 10% political power. Alright, let's take a look at political power. Let's see what that is at these days. I am very curious. I do actually have a livestock empire on standby here from the One Planet Challenge save that I have up and running. Let's take a look at, oh my lord, it seems to be broken. This is not the right one. This looks to be, there you go, it's Imperial Clones. That was my Gigastructures. That was my Gigastructures save file. Anyway, population, let's take a look here at our livestock. Livestock currently is sitting at 0.15 political power because they are in fact livestock and a slave. This basically means that, well, they literally have 0 political power, and that also means no factions will be spawning with them, which is very, very useful, as well as pop approval will go up quite significantly, which means stability will be significantly better on planets using livestock. So that's the thing. A lot of anomalies were rewarding 3 society research points. That made no sense whatsoever, and there is now more variety. Made Awakening empires use traditions. That does not impact any player. It just means that Awakened empires can use traditions and be a little bit more flexible. I would like to point out, in the previous multiplayer game for Stellaris, I of course was playing as a Awakened empire, and some of the yeah, some of the traditions were a little bit broken. Let's put it that way. They weren't particularly great. Several productivity improving technologies are no longer of dubious benefit, as their upkeep and production of only apply to the jobs they actually primary producing resources. Yeah, that's probably good. So I would assume that this has to do with, say, the improvements to alloy foundries that gives you a boost of like 5 to 15% or something along those lines, and all those modifiers, that the negative modifiers, such as upkeep applying to all of your pops on your planet. Yeah, apparently that has been fixed. So that's nice. Nerf staple hive mind pops can no longer perform complex drone jobs. Alright. Who found that one out? A stapled hive mind. Like, first of all, I don't nerf staple my pops to begin with. I've been playing Alpha Centauri for so long that I have a really big distaste when it comes to nerf stapling pops in general, because I just don't see the value of it. And apparently you can still do so, because usually it's better to just turn them into livestock anyway. But apparently hive minds can no longer have nerf stapled pops use complex drone jobs. I think that makes perfect sense. Reduce the amount of jobs added by leisure arcology districts to bring them in line with other ecumenopoli districts. That makes sense. Leisure arcologies generate unity and stuff like that, and they can be a little bit crazy unless you, well, unless you're careful about it. Ion cannons are no longer free to maintain. Thank God. I never used them. Now I have an upkeep cost of 8. Thank God. You can only build a maximum of, say, 2 to 3 of them at your stations, unless, of course, you go for the unyielding or specifically build for a defense strategy for your empire through traditions as well as ascension perks. I very rarely usually use ion cannons. I think personally stations are supplementary to fleets more than anything, and any fleet that engages a station and loses is probably failed to do its job, or at least whoever is controlling that fleet has not done the right thing. Let's put it that way. In a perfect world, stations should always be defended by players, or at least fleets. And I personally feel that any weapons on stations are just a waste of alloys. Let's put it that way. Cut necrophage pop assembly penalty to 50 from 75. Why would you even assemble necrophage pops to begin with? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because you're gonna turn, if you have any pop that is going to be assembled at a 0% penalty, just turn them the necrophage down the line. Like, that's why the Chamber of Elevation exists. I'm unsure why this happened. Mate pop modifiers, positive and negative, no longer apply to hive minds. I guess that makes sense. You are, in fact, one big pop, so I guess. Mate to 50% organic upkeep also apply to energy for photosynthesis. Interesting. I'm trying to think about how that affects photosynthesis and radiosynthesis as well as a species trait. Organic upkeep. Interesting. Oh, okay. So basically, no, I can still wrap my head around that. In comments below what this one actually means, because I'm trying to wrap my head around it. Devouring Swarm Necrophages, try to say that on an early Monday morning, now spawn with extra infrastructure to account for the lack of Chamber of Elevation. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. They wouldn't spawn automatically with a Chamber of Elevation, so I guess they would get an additional build slot. And Life Seeded now starts with a size 30 space planet. But I'm misreading this. Life Seed now starts with a 30, space planet. So as opposed to planets who are already in space, this planet has 30 spaces. Grammar, everybody. It is important for you to figure that one out. Let's quickly set up a life-seeded world here, just for the sake of being able to see it. And there it is, life-seeded. And let's just have life-seeded, size 30. That's crazy. I'm guessing this has mostly to do with with one of the new aquatic empires starting with 30 as well, effectively making it a type of life-seeded world. And there it is. Size 30, planet capacity 128, which is pretty extensive. And of course, we have the features here as well, such as the dust caverns, bubbling swamp, and crystalline caverns, and all that jazz. But don't you worry, everybody. This is, in fact, a space planet. So all the important nomenclature has been accounted for here. What an exciting time for everybody involved. Stability and performance. Now, there is a reasonable amount of stuff here, and overall, what it boils down to is that performance has improved, stability has improved. If you want to go a little bit deeper into this, then feel free. There's a couple of standouts here, such as the game will no longer try and fail to run Grey Goo events, True Masters on every planet, every day, which is probably the biggest thing, because the Grey Goo event only spawns in about, I want to say, 30% of games, and yeah, trying to trigger this every single day over every single planet in the game is going to cause some problems, obviously. So yeah, performance should definitely be very good, thanks to the support team as well. Whoa, okay, hold on. Fixed it out of sync caused by using button effects in custom mod UI. So now you can go back building that nickel Dyson beam to ensure galactic peace and prosperity. Is that a Gigastructure reference in my patch notes? Oh my, Ella Winnie is going to be so happy. Basically what this refers to is that there was an out of sync scenario, specifically in multiplayer, regarding the custom mod UI. And mod UI is something that has popped up in the last few years, or at least in the last 24 months or so, and they've been getting pretty advanced. But the previous patch broke those, which is unfortunate. But now it's been fixed, so once again you can build your nickel Dyson beams, or you can get ready and continue the undying partisanism against the Katzen Emperor. So yeah, there you go. I like it when they put some humor into the patch notes. It's always nice. UI, the music player bar is now hidden and can be extended by clicking the music item. Nice. Title of music player is now. We don't need to go into this. This is relatively unnecessary right here. It's mostly UI and UX. It's quality of life stuff. If you oh, new hotkey, all languages in the main menu. Interesting. But yeah, it's this UI and UX, quality of life stuff. AI! So, the UI is usually a little bit better. Now, we did a Dev Diary about that a little while back. So, basically, AI should be better. And basically actually be able to use their economy better. And that's a pretty big thing here. For instance, the AI can now build Ecumenopoly. So there is a fun one. Apparently AI didn't know how to use Ecumenopoly before. And they can also now actually repair shattered ring worlds, which is pretty darn nice. And they can also terraform. So all of this stuff is pretty darn good. And finally here, I particularly like this one. The AI will now consider anti-crime campaigns as a valid way to fighting crime. But will also occasionally also make deals with crime lords. Sure, why not? Bug fixes. There is a slew of those, and we will be. Yeah, we'll take a deeper dive here. Notification when upgrading a defense platform that will only appear when all queued upgrades are complete. Thank God, because the amount of pop-ups you would get on the top of your screen before when they were all done, because they're all considered technically their own fleet/ship, it would completely fill up the top of the screen. So yeah, which is nice. Crisis diplomatic greetings now appear when talking to a Crisis Empire rather than being with one. So I guess that's pretty darn nice as well. Devouring swarms have no longer got access to the diplomacy tradition tree. Yeah, for an empire that doesn't have any envoys, that's probably a good idea. Let's put it that way. Corporate Galactic Imperium not having access to catalytic processing and Mastercraft. This was probably an oversight where a certain type of Corporate Galactic Imperium. So I'm guessing that is an imperial empire that is not a mega corporation and is playing instead with with merchant guilds. I think it would be merchant guilds in that case, because it effectively works very similarly to the to mega corporations, but apparently they didn't have access to catalytic processing and Mastercraft before, which is kind of weird. Interesting. Flash this week's special projects will no longer cause your species to lose their name list. That's probably a good idea. Cracking non-colony planets will no longer reward menace. Shame about the exploit there, because you could just blow up planets and just get the points for menace if you are playing as a menace empire. Ancient cloning vats will now only assemble clone soldiers. Yeah, that makes sense. This is part of the clone soldier origin. If you have other species on your planet, you would be able to clone other soldiers that are not of the clone soldier variety. So yeah. Fix enlightened primitives. Lithoids getting farms instead of getting more mines. Primitive lithoids got farms and not mines, which meant they would starve to death because they wouldn't have minerals. That is hilarious. That is actually fun. Infertile clone pops will no longer be able to reproduce just because they're having a nice night out with Caravaneers. Okay, so Caravaneers every once in a while can spawn an event that basically allow you to get additional pops on your planet, and that will no, because of a night out with the Caravaneers, that no longer happens. So yeah, fix Niflax sometimes not being radiotrophic for owners of plantoids. It'd be nice if I've ever had seen Niflax before. It's one of the more powerful events in a way in the game. It is relatively rare. I've never seen it. I literally have never seen it. I've seen brain slugs like twice in like a few thousand hours of playing, but Niflax, never seen it in my entire life, which is pretty weird. Shattered Ring should no longer turn sphere into spheres when the Great Tempest attempts to turn it into a nanite world. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Apparently, there was no Shattered Ring exception for nanite worlds transitions, which I kind of makes sense as well. Racket Industries will no longer say that we'll give you 4 pops and don't only give you 3. They will also realize that while trying to scam you, they were trying to get you a great deal, so increase the amount of cost of the pops. So basically, you can buy pops from the Caravaneers, and apparently they would give you, they would give you 4, instead giving you 3, but for a very cheap price, which is nice. Robots will no longer have 0 upkeep while living decadent lifestyle. Oh, that's a great little bug right there. That is so unfortunate. I love that idea. That is great. Robots will no longer have 0 upkeep when living a decadent lifestyle. That's so fun. After reanimators discovered that the Desanu Consonance armies are made out of nanites, so the Desanu Consonance is one of the Elgate empires that can spawn, and basically they are the nanites. Apparently you can't reanimate them, and reanimators tried to do that in the past, so that's fun. I like this. I like these patch notes. They are pretty fun. Fixed newly found colony immigration pulling accidentally, capping out after 15 months rather than 15 years. Okay, so pop growth on newly founded colonies is actually better due to improved immigration up to 15 years or the first 10 pops. So pops will actually move back and forth a little bit more proactively. Fix an issue that during the year 2280, an empty Marauder raiding fleet would be created. Okay. I guess that was a thing. There's a lot of other interesting things here, such as the Corporate Dominion Civic now unlocks the Trading Lead Federation type. So if you are a Corporate Dominion, then you can actually get the Trade League Federation, which is an interesting one. And the rest is just generally just fixes here and there. A good example would be Ancient Drones will no longer be removing deposits that have benefits. That is an event chain. Alloy Foundry's localization has been fixed and that sort of thing. So there's quite a lot of interesting stuff here that may or may not have a lot of impact, such as fixing inconsistent translation of the description of the Byzantine bureaucracy civic in French. That's kind of the level of stuff that we are at here. So yeah, overall, this is you can go ahead and read this. I put the patch notes below as well. Modding, if you are a modder, I'm sure this is super exciting to you. Feel free to go have a look at it, and that is basically it. It's important to know that if you are coming in from the LEM update and you were skittish to update just now because of losing integrity on your save games, it shouldn't have any effect whatsoever at the moment. However, it's always a good idea to roll back your version of your game if you're encountering problems. By going into your library, go into properties, then into betas, and then the version that you would like. The previous version of the game is, of course, 3.1 Lem, named after Stanislav Lem, of course. And that wraps up our patch note review for version 3.2 Herbert, coming out with the aquatic patch, and it is an exciting time, of course, in Stellaris. Aquatics came out yesterday, and of course the patch notes need to be properly reviewed, and this is why I wanted to wait doing this video. But still, I hope that you enjoyed this. Patch notes can be pretty dry sometimes, which is why I like to add a little bit of levity in here. Is there anything in here that you particularly enjoy? If you've watched all the way into the video this far, 36 minutes in, do you enjoy the changes that have been made? That the seeded life is now a larger planet, or that aquatics is now one trait point, or that the French localization for a very specific trait has been fixed? I'm sure you do. Anyway, we're going to go and wrap this thing up here. I'm looking forward to see your comments below. If you haven't subscribed just yet and you're really into Stellaris content, make sure you do, because we will keep you up to date at all times. Also, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to Stefan. He's a good guy, and he does things in like a min-maxy way all the time. A little bit different from the way things I do, and yeah, it's maybe something interesting for you to look at as well. Tomorrow, we'll be looking at Here Be Dragons, the origin that comes with Aquatics. And after that, we'll be taking a look at Ocean Paradise. A exciting time ahead. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons. And until next time, take good care of yourselves. And as always, check your localization for French typography errors.